Ari Temkin from Big 12 Radio joins us on 365 Sports. He's no longer a holdout like Micah Parsons. We tried to trade him. There was no value. There was no. Hey, I'm just kidding. Good to see you.
2 first-round picks, Smoak.
Yeah,
no,
I know, and then a lot of money too. Now, let's get to TCU. Looked great last night. Obviously overlooked throughout the day leading up to it. Utah appears to be healthy. Iowa State, to me, looks really good in Arizona State. But let's discuss the Frogs and Sonny Dykes, man. They looked explosive.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the first drive, it pretty wild. The first drive, offensively and defensively for TCU, throw those away, and it was basically a perfect game. But their defense gave up a ton of yardage, and you're thinking, oh, here we go again. And watching some of these Big 12 matchups in Power 4 versus Power 4, and then I think we really saw the strength of TCU. Look, this shouldn't be much of a surprise. Maybe the fact that they beat the tar out of them. But, I mean, TCU has been number 1 in the Big 12 in recruiting in 2 of the last 3 years. The 1 year they weren't, they were number 2. So, I mean, suddenly these players that were young 4 or 5 stars coming up through TCU are now becoming major contributors. And I think we're seeing that along their offensive and defensive line. They were as disruptive and good in terms of their running and passing, disruptive on the defensive line, and then the ability to run block and pass block. It was basically a perfect game for them. And I think, you don't want to overreact too much to one game, but I had them 5th in my preseason rankings. I probably didn't have them high enough. Another team I probably didn't have it high enough was Utah, and then Iowa State as well as another team I probably didn't have high enough.
Ari, watching them, I mean, you kind of see the 2-year build of the roster where they kind of changed their strategy in the transfer portal a little bit. They went out and Kavorian Barnes, fantastic at running back last night to kind of reestablish the running game. They look like they're actually running both the coordinator systems last night. It's where last year they were learning Andy Avalos, and they looked like at times they were running like 80% of Kendall Bryle's system.
Yeah, and I mean, I think specific to Andy Avalos, like they didn't have the personnel to run the type of defense that they wanted to run. I mean, so it was a complete departure from the previous, Gillespie defense that they had been running. And so last year, it makes sense that they would struggle so much as they try to turn their roster over and, try to mold their down linemen specifically to fit more into that Avalos system, which I think, obviously looked really good last night. I mean, I don't want to overreact too much to the defense because, it was a brand new offense for North Carolina. And, I think after the first scripted series for North Carolina offensively, their quarterback looked very confused and lost in a brand new system. But I think what we did see is like one of the most experienced and best secondaries of the Big 12 and a defensive front that's really, really good. And I think that's what led to, Bud Clark did the pick 6 all by himself for the most part, but their scoop and score touchdown and really the disruption they had throughout the course of the game, Paul, was related to what they were doing up front. I mean, I think look at the Baylor game, look at the Georgia Tech Colorado game, look at this game, look at the Utah game, like the common thread. And these were, 4 of the 5 Power 4 versus Power 4 matchups that we had. Like it pretty simple. The teams that dominated in those games, the teams that won up front, especially on the offensive line. TCU struggled last year to run the football. It doesn't look like they're going to have that same issue this year because their offensive line has it figured out. And you've got a physical back like Barnes with an offensive line that can open up holes. I think you got a huge opportunity here. So yeah, I mean, it's as much as the game has evolved, it's still fairly simplistic. Like just look at those 4 games. Utah completely dominated line of scrimmage against UCLA. So did TCU, and Auburn dominated against Baylor at the line of scrimmage, and so too did Georgia Tech against Colorado.
So, Ari, that leads me well into talking about those matchups, the 5 games, the one you didn't mention, Cincinnati losing to Nebraska. So the Big 12 2-3 in these crossover Power 4 matchups, and there will be some more of those games this weekend. And the reason why these matter is not just the tribalism aspect, but like also because of the playoff discussion at the end of the year when you're comparing like who beat this many Power 4 teams and whatnot. So there's a very good chance they in the ACC are fighting for a spot, and it could come down to games like this. So what was your impression of this 2-3 record? It feels like TCU kind of saved the day from this being a nightmare, even though Utah looked really good.
Yeah, and I caught your discussion there with the AP Top 25. And so, yeah, I mean, these games mean a heck of a ton when it comes to that, and then in turn the college football playoff rankings. Yeah, I mean, I would say it was pretty much a disastrous opening weekend for the Big 12 that was saved by TCU and saved it away because it was on national television in front of a huge audience with nobody else, no other games on. You know, I think part of that, though, the amendment to that is so much of the conversation today has been about Bill Belichick, and man, he's in over his head. He, you know, does he know what he signed up for? So as opposed to the story here, which was, man, TCU is really good and North Carolina's probably not nearly as good as we thought they were. The conversation's more around Belichick. So I don't know how much, you know, that helps TCU. Maybe it does. TCU is a really good football team. I know that when the season's, you know, winding down and whatever North Carolina's record will be, like TCU will have a ton of wins and we shouldn't be surprised by that. So independent of the, you know, the interconference, you know, intersectional matchups here, like TCU proved last night that they're as good as we thought they might be based on preseason expectations, based on personnel.
I know. Oh, I'm sorry. I know it wasn't Kansas State. Well, that was a nice win for Iowa State, but then they just throttled South Dakota. All right, maybe they should. Iowa this week, I think they're not getting enough recognition, and doesn't mean if they beat Iowa they'll jump too much, but they sure look like a complete football team.
No question. And also, like, Kansas State needed a touchdown at the end of a game to beat a North Dakota team that, from an FCS perspective, is middle of the pack. South Dakota is a legitimate top 10, top 15 FCS program that Iowa State absolutely ran out of the building. You should do that with every FCS team if you're a high-level Power 4 conference team. But, I mean, what Kansas State didn't do against North Dakota, which is half the team South Dakota is, we'll see when it's all said and done how this thing shakes out. But I completely agree with you, Smokey. The fortunes of these two programs in Iowa and Iowa State have changed so dramatically, just in terms of, like, Iowa, we year in and year out was thought of as, you know, a major Big Ten contributor that could be, you know, competing for Big Ten championships. Now it's the opposite. You know, they're thought of as a joke of the Big Ten. The Big 12, meanwhile, Iowa State's a team that's consistently competing for Big 12 championships. I mean, the quarterback matchup in here, I don't know if you guys saw the numbers for Iowa State's quarterback, Mark Gronowski, from last week. He's a transfer from South Dakota State. And, I mean, he basically put up 44 yards of passing and a touchdown against Albany. So, I mean, that's par for the course for Iowa. I get it. But, I mean, they're supposed to have a little bit more of an explosive offense. So, to me, the spread in this game, just being 3 probably isn't enough points for an Iowa State team. I understand these two teams have played really close games of late, and I certainly expect this game to be close. But Iowa State is the much better program right now and in a much better spot. And, yeah, there's a chance that Iowa State could blow them out.
Who are you concerned about after week 1?
Outside
of Kansas State. Outside of them.
Yeah.
Well, Baylor. I mean, obviously, not just because I picked Baylor to win the Big 12, but I think a lot of people figured that Baylor would be one of the 5 best teams in the Big 12. And, you know, we knew the offense was going to be good. I think it was a surprise that the running game was completely ineffective. And, you know, it was basically all on Sawyer Robertson. And, I mean, he put up some big-time numbers. One of the things that I was a little bit miffed about, or maybe confused about, was why he didn't take off more. You know, it felt like he just had this plan going into this game and going to the season that he's going to become a pocket passer. And, you know, I mean, Baylor was at its best last year when Sawyer Robertson was taking what the defense gives and, you know, earning yardage with his legs, you know, and I think it also helped to kickstart the running game as well. So maybe that would have been the secret sauce to getting the running game going in that game, because there seemed to be opportunities, especially 3rd and 4th down opportunities, where, like, he had opportunities to run upfield and he just didn't take them. He sat back in the pocket and tried to make a play with his arm. And so, like, I think, like, so number one, that's a surprise there that the running game was as bad as it was. And maybe that had to do with Auburn, or maybe it had to do with Sawyer Robertson not wanting to take off, because, again, I think his ability to run impacts the Baylor running game in a majorly positive way. But the bigger disappointment was obviously what happened on defense. I mean, you just cannot have a guy that can't complete passes consistently run up the middle on you as often and as successfully as Jackson Arnold did. I mean, I get the approach of you want to neutralize their passing attack, which was really good coming in based on the receivers that they had. But, like, at some point you gotta nix the 2 high safeties and play them honestly and try to see what you could do. I get the loss early in the game, the pass rusher, you know, what that had in terms of the impact overall. But, like, I thought if you're Baylor, you should have had more up front on the defensive line, especially in the middle. I heard all offseason about how much work Dave Aranda had put in terms of the middle, the interior of that defensive line, for it to be as bad as it looked week one. So, yeah, Baylor, hugely disappointing. And look, it remains to be seen how good Auburn is. Maybe we'll look back on that game at the end of the year and be like, it was just two really good football teams. But after 1 week, the questions we had about Baylor, specifically on the defensive side, were not answered.
So I'll ask the flip of that question, but we've talked, Cincinnati, Baylor, Colorado, this team that struggled. There's a lot to choose from because 13 teams did win their games. Some of them not as impressive like Kansas State, but Utah, mightily impressive. BYU, the return of Rich Rod. I mean, where did your head go as far as something that jumped out of like, oh, wow, that was really impressive in week one?
I mean, Iowa State, again, I know it's South Dakota, but that's a top 10 FCS team. And I mean, they made them look like, they were just any random FCS team, which again, you probably should do if you're a top tier big Power 4 team, but it's that coupled with the fact that what they did week one. I mean, Rocco Becht, and I said this to Matt Campbell at Big 12 Media Days. Like, I know what Brock Purdy has done in the NFL, but given the two samples of college, Rocco Becht is a better college quarterback than Brock Purdy was. And he's continuing to prove that. I mean, the dude, this is a quarterback league. He may very well be the best quarterback in this league. He is so dynamic. And like it's really interesting. Matt Campbell and Iowa State, they were really poor for like 2 straight years in 1-score games. And that's completely flipped. And a lot of that has to do with Rocco Becht. Like, you give him the ball at the end of a game in a close game and the game's over. He's going to win it for you. And the other thing too, is I know coming into the season, the loss of Higgins and Knoll were huge question marks, but I think Rocco Becht, number one, is good enough to overcome those losses. And two, the emergence of their 2 tight ends over the middle of the field, which is something we've seen before from Iowa State, in Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle, those 2 guys, 6'6", 6'7", 260-pound, huge tight end targets. So I think this offense will evolve. And then maybe very quietly, Nico Marchiol in West Virginia. Again, not a great opponent, but like, they had 5 turnovers in that game and still won the football game, which is sort of insane. And Marchiol in this offense, that's just really intriguing. Like, I want to see more of this. We're going to get a much better look of this against a much better Ohio team this week and then Pitt next week. So it really ramps up for West Virginia, but they're maybe one of my potential major surprise teams in the Big 12 this year.
I know you got to go for an appointment that you have it for. You mentioned Sawyer. I thought he was tentative in running. I did not understand it. I didn't know. Was he still – is there something
He got hit
him?
A lot too.
Yeah,
like he got put on his back quite a bit.
Part of it might have been he was gun shy, but he had opportunities to take off and just seemed like he was either told not to, didn't want to, or just it was one of those nights and he got a little bit frazzled. And he's a good player.
I mean, the passing numbers speak for themselves, and it basically was all on him. I mean, it looked a lot like watching TCU last year, where all they had was this incredible passing game, and that had to save them every week. They had no running game TCU last year, and the defense wasn't going to help them. And that's what Baylor had week one, and that's not what we expected for this team to be. I want to go back and look at some of the early season games when Sawyer got going last year with Baylor, obviously after DeQuan Finn, but it felt like a big reason for why Bryson Washington got going on the season was because of Sawyer's ability to run and what that did to pull defenses in. So, yeah, I totally agree with you, Smokey, and I'm glad you caught that too, because I think it lends a greater credence to that. Like, he just looked tentative. I mean, there were multiple opportunities. You were watching this play develop, and you see the pocket, and you're like, go! You've got room to run, and he just didn't do it. He did not want to do it. And I think for this offense to be as explosive as it could possibly be, he needs to be able to be a legitimate dual threat. It shouldn't, to his credit, be the first option. Like, you've got to figure out a way to become a more consistent passer, but it cannot be. I mean, he didn't have any rushing attempts. He took 4 sacks.
Yep.
So when you look at the rushing numbers, the four rushing attempts for minus whatever yardage is all sacks. He did not rush once. That is a shock.
Yeah, no, that's why he's valuable, not just because he throws for 300 or 400, but because of his mobility. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you jumping on. Ari Temkin with us with Big 12 Radio will join us on Tuesdays in the 3 o'clock hour.